Picture a machine rolling down a highway in northwest China. It moves slowly. It rides on 10 axles, 20 huge tires in a row longer than a basketball court. Trucks pull over to let it pass. People stop and stare. It looks like something that should not be allowed on a public road. And yet here it is, driving along on its own wheels like an ordinary truck out for a delivery. But this is no ordinary truck. This is a crane, and not just any crane. Here is the part that sounds made up. This machine can lift 4,000 tons. 4,000. That is roughly the weight of 2,000 cars dangling from a single arm. It is about 3 times the lifting power of the previous world record holder, a famous German crane. 3 times, not 3% more, 3 times more. And the strangest part of all, it still folds down to a road width of about 3 meters. That is narrow enough to drive through a normal toll booth. A machine that can hoist 2,000 cars into the sky, slim enough to share a highway with you. This is the Zoomlion Zia T40,000H. It was unveiled in September of 2024 in the city of Changsha. And on the day it rolled out, it became the largest wheeled crane ever built by human hands. The biggest in the world. So why does it exist? Why build a monster this size? The answer is waiting thousands of kilometers away, out in China's emptiest, windiest deserts. There is a problem out there, and until this machine arrived, nobody could solve it. To understand the crane, you have to understand the hunger that built it, and the hunger is electricity. China is the biggest user of energy on the planet. Think about that for a second. More than 1 billion people, millions of factories, whole cities lit up around the clock. All of it runs on power, and for decades, most of that power came from one thing: coal. Even in 2024, coal still made about 54% of China's electricity, more than half, burned in giant plants day and night. But coal has a cost. It pollutes the air. It warms the planet. So China started looking for another way to keep the lights on, and it found one blowing across its own backyard: wind. Out in the far west and north of the country, there are deserts, vast empty places, the Gobi, the dry lands of Xinjiang, Gansu, and Inner Mongolia. Almost nobody lives there. The ground is flat and bare for hundreds of kilometers. And the wind never stops. It races across the open sand with nothing to slow it down. So the plan was simple to say and enormous to do. Build wind farms where the wind blows hardest. Plant giant turbines in the desert, let them spin day and night, and send that clean power back to the cities. Now here is the thing about wind turbines. They want to be tall, very tall. And the reason is beautiful in its simplicity. The higher you go, the faster and steadier the wind blows. A turbine on a short tower catches lazy, gusty wind near the ground. Lift that same turbine higher and it catches a smooth, powerful river of air. Make the blades longer too, and each spin sweeps a bigger circle of sky. So every extra meter of height earns more electricity. Every extra meter of blade catches more wind. More height, more power. More blade, more power. The math always points the same direction, up. And so the turbines kept growing. Year after year, taller towers, longer blades. Engineers chasing the wind higher and higher into the sky because that is where the energy lies. But there is a catch hiding in all that height. A problem that nobody talks about in the glossy brochures. The taller you build a turbine, the harder it becomes to put together. Because you do not grow a turbine in place like a tree. You build it on the ground in pieces. And then you have to lift those pieces up onto a tower, up into the sky. And to lift them, you need a crane. For years, that worked just fine. The turbines got taller and the cranes kept up, but the turbines did not stop growing. And somewhere up there, at a height no crane on wheels could reach, the two lines crossed. The turbines had finally outgrown the machines built to raise them. Now let me show you the true size of what China is building. Because this is not one wind farm. It is not 100 wind farms. It is something the world has never attempted before. China's plan is to build about 455 gigawatts of wind and solar power out in its deserts by the year 2030. 455 gigawatts. That number is so big it stops meaning anything, so let me make it real. That single desert build-out would be more clean power than any other country on Earth has in total. More than any single nation outside China possesses, full stop. One country putting it all in the sand. They call these projects megabases, and they are aimed at specific patches of desert. More than half the capacity goes to 4 named deserts: the Kubuki, the Ulanbu, the Tenger, and the Badain Jaran. Hard, dry, sun-baked places where the wind howls and nothing grows. The plan was to have about 200 gigawatts of it already running by 2025, with the rest racing in before the end of the decade. And to feel why this needed a special crane, you have to look at the turbines themselves. Picture the machines at the center of this story. They are rated at 6.25 megawatts each, one turbine. They stand on towers more than 170 meters tall. That is taller than a 50-story skyscraper. The blades stretch around 108 meters long, each one longer than a football field. And resting on top of that tower sits the heart of the machine. It is called the nacelle. The nacelle is the big box that holds the generator and the gears, the part that actually turns wind into electricity. And that box is heavy, brutally heavy. A single nacelle for one of these turbines weighs more than 150 tons. 150 tons, sitting on top of a tower as tall as a skyscraper. So picture the job. You have a box that weighs as much as 100 cars. You have 3 blades, each longer than a football pitch. And you have to lift all of it, gently, precisely, nearly 200 meters into the open sky. Out in a remote desert, where there are no buildings, no permanent roads, no help for miles. The wind that you came to harvest is the same wind that fights you the whole way up. To do that job, you needed a crane that was tall enough, strong enough, and steady enough to set 150 tons onto a needle nearly 200 meters in the air. And in the whole world on wheels, that crane did not yet exist. Somebody was going to have to build it from scratch. So who builds a crane like this? Not a startup, not a lab. You need a company that has spent decades learning how to lift heavy things without dropping them. That company is Zoomlion. Its full name is a mouthful: Zoomlion Heavy Industry Science and Technology. But the important part is simpler. It is a crane maker. Its home is the city of Changsha in Hunan province in central China, and it has been building mobile cranes for a very long time. Machines that drive themselves to a job, lift something enormous, and then drive away to the next one. This is not a company that stumbled into giant cranes by accident. It has spent decades building heavy machinery, learning the slow, careful craft of lifting things that should not be liftable, and earning the right to attempt something this audacious. Now here is the story you really want, because it is a story about climbing, about a company reaching higher and higher, one machine at a time. Back in 2012, Zoomlion built a wheeled crane that could lift 2,000 tons. At the time, that was a giant, a serious machine. They called it the QOI 2000. Then in 2022, they went bigger again. They rolled out a crane they called the Zia T24000H. It could lift 2,400 tons. It rode on a 9-axle chassis, more than 22 meters long, and could raise a turbine to a height of around 160 meters in roughly half an hour. And with that machine, Zoomlion did something remarkable. It broke the world record. The 2,400-ton crane became the most powerful wheeled crane on the planet. You might think that would be enough. They held the record. Game over. But the deserts kept calling. The turbines kept growing taller. And so the engineers went back to work. In September of 2024, the doors opened on something new. Zoomlion did not just unveil a crane. It unveiled the factory that builds them too. A brand new plant they describe as the world's first truly intelligent factory for wheeled cranes, covering the entire making of the machine from start to finish. And this factory is fast, almost unbelievably fast. It can finish a complete wheeled crane roughly every 18 minutes. Think about that. In the time it takes you to make a cup of coffee and drink it, a new crane rolls off the line. And out of that factory walked the new champion, the 4,000-ton machine, the Zia T40000H. But here is what makes this story different. Zoomlion did not just build a bigger version of the same old thing for the sake of a headline. This crane was not made to win a record. It was made to solve one specific problem. A problem waiting out in the desert, a problem that no machine on Earth had ever been able to crack. To really feel how big a leap this was, you have to meet the machine it dethroned. For years, the most powerful wheeled crane in the world came from Germany. It was made by a company called Liebherr, and the machine was called the LTM 11200. It rode on a 9-axle carrier, carried a 100-meter telescopic boom, and could lift 1,200 tons. It first appeared back in 2007, and for a long time after that, it was the ceiling, the best the world could do on wheels. The machine every other crane was measured against, 1,200 tons. Now hold that number next to 4,000. Zoomlion's new crane is roughly 3 times stronger. It does not edge past the old record. It does not beat it by a little. It roughly triples it. That is not an improvement. That is a different category of machine. But raw power was never the whole point. Zoomlion was very clear about what this crane was for. It was built to install the super-large wind turbines of the future, the ones rated from 6 all the way up to 10 megawatts. And the company makes a bold claim about it. It says this is the only wheeled crane in the world that can install a wind turbine at a height of 185 meters. 185 meters, in the air, on wheels. Nothing else like it can reach that high. And here is the engineering trick that should not be possible. This machine can lift 4,000 tons, but when it is time to travel, it narrows down to a standard road width of about 3 meters. 3 meters. It rides on a 10-axle chassis and every wheel can steer, so the whole long body can curl around corners and thread through narrow desert tracks. Picture a snake that can also lift a mountain. So you have this strange double identity. On the road, it is a vehicle, slim and legal and self-driving, going where it is told. On the job site, it unfolds into the most powerful lifting machine ever put on tires. The same metal does both. That is the magic, and that is exactly why it can reach the deserts at all. A crane this strong that could not drive itself there would be useless. But building the crane was only half the job. The harder half was still coming, because making a 4,000-ton machine in a clean, bright factory in Changsha is one thing. Getting it across the country, out to the empty desert, and then rebuilding it there, piece by piece on shifting sand, with the wind clawing at you the whole time. That is a story all its own. And it starts with a convoy. Here is the first thing that surprises people. A crane this big does not drive to the job site in one piece. It cannot. It is far too heavy and far too long to travel fully assembled, so it comes apart. When the ZT 40,000H heads to a job, it travels as a convoy. A long, slow-moving line of trucks and flatbeds, around 28 support vehicles in all. Think of that. Nearly 30 vehicles crawling across the country together, just to deliver one machine. Some carry the chassis. Some carry the boom sections. Some haul the counterweights, the giant slabs of metal that keep the crane from tipping over. Others carry the blades and tower pieces of the turbine itself, because those have to make the trip too. It is less like sending a vehicle to a job and more like moving a small factory across the country. A whole rolling town of steel, fuel, and crew, all heading for one patch of empty sand. And the blades deserve a moment on their own. A single blade for one of these desert turbines is around 108 meters long, longer than a football field. You cannot just lay that on a normal truck. So China uses special blade transport vehicles, trucks with bodies that stretch and extend, carrying one enormous blade laid out flat, snaking through the landscape like a giant arrow. It is one of the strangest sights on any highway in the world. So the convoy arrives at the desert site, and now comes the part that sounds like a riddle. How do you assemble a crane this big? The answer is almost funny. You need other cranes to build this crane. Smaller cranes brought along just to lift the giant's own pieces into place. The machine is so large that it cannot put itself together. It needs help to be born, so the crews get to work. First, they set down the rotating base, the heavy turntable that the whole upper body will spin on. Then they extend the outriggers. Now, outriggers are the legs that reach out from the sides of the crane and press down on the ground. They are what keep a lifting machine from falling over sideways. And out here in the desert, the outriggers matter more than ever, because the ground is sand. Soft, loose, shifting sand. If you just set a 4,000-ton crane down on sand, it would sink. It would lean. It would be a disaster. So the outriggers end in wide, flat pads. Big square feet that spread the crane's weight across a large patch of ground. Think of them like snowshoes. A person in regular boots punches straight through deep snow. Put on snowshoes with their wide, flat surface, and the same person walks right across the top. The weight is the same. The trick is spreading it out. The pads do exactly that. Instead of pressing the crane's enormous load down through a few narrow points, they spread it across broad squares of steel so the ground feels a gentle push instead of a brutal stab. They let a machine heavier than a building stand steady on ground that would swallow a normal truck. So now the base is set. The legs are out. The snowshoe pads are pressing the crane firmly into the desert floor. The machine is stable. It is anchored, but it is not finished. Not even close. Because right now it is just a body with no arm. The thing that does the actual lifting, the enormous boom and the long wind jib that reaches for the sky, still has to be built and raised. And only then does the real work begin. Now we build the arm. And the arm is the soul of this machine. It comes in two parts. First, the main boom. This is the thick, strong section that does the heavy lifting, and on this crane it stretches about 94 meters. Then attached to the end of it comes the wind jib. The jib is a lighter lattice section, a long open framework of steel, the kind of crisscrossed web you see in a high-voltage tower. It adds another 111 meters. Put them together, end to end, and the whole arm reaches about 210 meters. 210 meters of steel swinging from one machine. To picture that, imagine laying 2 football fields end to end, then standing them upright into the sky. And it can set a load down at a height above 190 meters. That is the secret of how it touches the top of a skyscraper-tall tower. But length alone is not enough. The real breakthrough is what this crane can do with a single arm. In the past, lifting a turbine often meant bringing two giant cranes to the site, one to hold the load, one to help steady and guide it. Two monster machines, two crews, two schedules to line up out in the middle of nowhere. It was slow, expensive, and a logistics nightmare. The Zia T40,000H is built to do it alone. Zoomlian calls it single-arm autonomous lifting, and it leans on something clever. The crane uses artificial intelligence, computer control, to constantly balance the load as it rises. As the heavy piece sways or the wind nudges it, the machine makes tiny corrections, dozens of small adjustments, keeping everything level and steady. So one crane can lift and place the nacelle and the rotor by itself, with no second giant standing by. One arm, one machine, one job done solo. To pull that off, it needs weight on its own body to balance the weight on its hook. That is the counterweight, the stack of heavy slabs at the back of the crane. It works just like a seesaw. To lift a heavy load far out front, you need heavy weight sitting at the back, or the whole thing tips over. And this counterweight is modular, meaning the crew can add or remove slabs to match the job. A small lift needs only a little. A monster lift needs a lot. They can scale the counterweight from as little as 100 tons up to a staggering 4,000 tons, cross operating heights from 30 meters all the way to 210 meters. And despite all that bulk, Zoomlian claims the crane can place a load with a precision of about plus or minus 2 centimeters. Think about that for a moment. A machine balancing thousands of tons, 200 meters up in a desert breeze, landing its load within the width of 2 fingers. So now the picture is complete. The base is anchored in the sand. 200-meter arm is built and raised, pointing into the desert sky. The counterweight is stacked at the back. The computer is watching, ready to balance every twitch of the wind. The machine is ready. But a crane, no matter how magnificent, is only a tool. It is built to do one thing. So now point all of this power, all of this height, all of this precision at a real target. Out on the desert floor, waiting in the dust, sits a 150-ton nacelle and 3 blades, each longer than a football field. It is time to lift. So what does the first real lift look like? Let me take you there. When the wind power version of this crane, the Zia T40,000H7, went to work for the first time, the job was a 6.25 megawatt turbine. The target was a hub height of 160 meters. That is the point where the spinning blades meet the tower, about as high as a 50-story building. And to be clear, this first lift was not actually in the Gobi. It happened at a wind farm in Taiyuan County in Liaoning Province in the northeast of China. The deserts are the big destination, the reason the crane exists. But the proving ground came first. Now watch the hardest pieces go up. The nacelle, that generator box, weighed around 150 tons. The rotor, the whole spinning assembly, came as one integrated piece weighing around 130 tons. The crane lifted them up, smooth and steady, the top of that 50-story tower, and set them in place. Then came the blades, 3 of them, each around 108 meters long, each weighing about 30 tons. One by one they were raised and bolted on until the turbine was whole. And here is where you learn the strangest enemy of the whole operation, the wind. The very thing this turbine was built to catch is the thing that makes the lift so dangerous. Because think about a blade. It is 100 meters of curved, smooth surface hanging from cables in the open air. That is not just a heavy object, that is a sail, a giant sail. A gust of wind hits it and suddenly the blade wants to swing, to spin, to twist on the line. With a 150-ton nacelle 200 meters up, a sudden gust is the last thing you want. So the crews wait. They watch the weather like hawks. They study forecasts, they watch the flags, they feel the air on their faces. They cannot lift in strong wind, so they hunt for the calm windows, the rare, still moments when the desert air goes quiet. Sometimes those windows come at dawn, sometimes they come in the dead of night, and the windows do not last. A few minutes of calm, then the wind returns. So the crews work whenever the wind allows, lifting 100-ton pieces by floodlight in the small hours, racing to set a blade before the breeze comes back. They came to harvest the wind, and to do it, they first have to wait for the wind to hold its breath. It is patient, dangerous, exhausting work. And here is the thing. This is not a one-time stunt for the cameras. This single machine, this lonely giant on the desert floor, is now being aimed at a job with no end in sight. Because across China, turbines are going up by the hundreds, year after year, faster than almost anyone outside the country realizes. Let me show you the pace of this thing, because the pace is the real story. In a single year, in 2024, China added on the order of 80 gigawatts of new wind power. In 1 year, That is roughly the entire wind fleet of a large European country, built and switched on in 12 months. And this was not a fluke. China has been the world's largest wind market for 15 years in a row. 15 straight years at number one. Nobody else has come close. By the end of 2025, its total installed wind capacity had climbed to somewhere around 640 to 690 gigawatts. A wall of spinning blades stretched across a continent. And the plan only accelerates from here, aiming to add at least 120 gigawatts more every single year through the rest of the decade. And the machines themselves keep getting bigger, which keeps changing the math. In October of 2024, a Chinese company called Sany installed the largest onshore wind turbine in the world. It was a 15-megawatt machine, put up at Tongyu in Jilin province. Its rotor, the full circle the blades carve out, measures 270 meters across. The blades alone are about 131 meters long, and a single one of these giants can produce around 56 million kilowatt-hours of electricity in a year. That is enough to power roughly 160,000 homes from one turbine. But the bigger the turbine, the heavier the pieces and the higher they have to go, which means the bigger the crane you need to raise them. The turbines and the cranes are in a kind of race, climbing together, each one pushing the other higher. And this is where the design of the Zia T40000H really pays off. Remember, it lifts with a single arm, no second giant crane required, and it drives itself to the job on its own wheels. Out on a remote desert site, those two things change everything. You do not have to schedule and ship a second monster machine. You do not have to build as many heavy-duty roads just to bring extra equipment in. You spend less time waiting, less time idle, less money on the whole tangle of logistics. On a site hundreds of kilometers from anywhere, every one of those savings matters enormously. So China has the cranes, the turbines, the factories, and the sheer momentum, all pulling in the same direction, up and outward across the deserts. But here is what makes this bigger than one country. This problem, the turbines outgrowing the cranes, is not just China's problem. It is everyone's. All around the world, wind turbines keep getting taller and heavier, and the machines that lift them keep falling behind. Every wind nation on Earth is going to slam into the same wall. And right now, they are all watching China to see whether this 4,000-ton answer actually works. Now let us be honest, because a story this big always has a harder side and it deserves a fair hearing. Start with the desert itself. These places are beautiful from a distance, but they are brutal to work in. The temperature can swing wildly, scorching by day and freezing by night. The wind, the very thing you came for, never really stops, and it carries sand that gets into everything, into the engines, into the joints, into your eyes. There are almost no roads, no towns, no hospitals nearby, no spare parts down the street. If a machine breaks out there, help is a long way off, and a stalled crane can mean days of lost work. Every bolt, every worker, every liter of water has to be hauled in across hundreds of kilometers of nothing. It is some of the hardest construction on the planet, and there is no easy version of it. You are racing a clock, a budget, and the weather all at once, in a place that wants nothing to do with you. Then there is the grid problem, and this one is serious. The power you make in the desert is not where the people are. The cities, the factories, the demand, all of that is far to the east, so a huge share of that desert electricity has to travel. China moves it along ultra-high voltage lines, special power highways that carry electricity hundreds, even thousands of kilometers to distant cities. It is an incredible feat of engineering, but it is also a real limit. If the lines are not built fast enough, or if the wind blows hard when the cities do not need the power, some of that clean energy simply gets wasted, switched off, lost. Engineers call it curtailment, and it is a genuine constraint on the whole dream. And then there is the elephant in the room, coal. For all the spinning turbines and gleaming solar fields, coal has not let go of China. Even as wind and solar surged, even as their combined capacity raced past thermal power for the first time in early 2025, coal was still supplying roughly half of China's electricity through 2024 and into 2025. Half. The renewables are growing astonishingly fast, but they are growing on top of a coal system that is still enormous and still running. So it raises a fair and uncomfortable question. When you build the world's biggest crane, and raise thousands of turbines and string power lines across a continent, what are you actually doing? Are you breaking away from coal at last, finally leaving it behind? Or are you simply building more of everything at once, clean and dirty side by side, two giants growing together rather than one replacing the other? There is one more part of this story that surprises almost everyone. The deserts are not just there to make power. They are also a battleground in a much older war, a war against the sand itself. For generations, China has fought creeping deserts, dunes that swallow farmland, dust storms that choke whole cities. So when planners drew up these megabases, they pitched them as a weapon in that fight too. The idea is that rows of solar panels and lines of planted shrubs can help pin down the dunes, slow the marching sand, and hold the desert in place. They even have a name for it, the War on Sand. And there is real evidence that it works, at least in part. In the Gobi Desert, raised solar panels have changed the tiny world beneath them. They shade the ground, so far less water evaporates away. Reports describe a drop of around 800 millimeters of evaporation per year under the panels, and the wind speed near the ground falling by about 1.5 meters per second. That is just enough shelter for grasses and shrubs to take root in sand that was bare before. And a study published in 2024 looked at solar plants across 12 Chinese deserts. It found that roughly a third of the land under those panels showed a real greening trend. Plants growing where there had been only sand, so that is the hopeful reading. Clean power and a greener desert both at once. But there is a harder question underneath, and it is fair to ask it. Is all of this really about saving the planet? Or is it also a strategy, a bet to dominate the energy and the manufacturing of the entire world for decades to come? China makes the cranes. It makes the turbines. It makes the panels and the power lines. Building the biggest clean energy system on Earth also means building the biggest clean energy industry on Earth. The factories, the patents, the supply chains, the jobs. Climate action and national power, wrapped together so tightly you cannot fully pull them apart. Honest people can land on different sides of that. Maybe it is genuine. Maybe it is strategic. Maybe, most likely, it is both at the same time. And that is just how the biggest things in the world get built. But here is what is no longer up for debate, whatever the motive. Whatever you believe about why China is doing this, the machine to keep going taller already exists. It is built. It is real. It is out there in the desert right now. And the question that follows from that is not whether it can be done. It is how high this is all going to go. So how high does this go? Let us look forward carefully, because the future here is more possibility than promise. Start with the crane itself. The Zia T40000H7 is not built just for today's turbines. It is already designed to lift at heights above 190 meters, and it is built to handle the next generation, the coming 8-megawatt class of onshore turbines, machines even taller and heavier than the ones going up now. In other words, the crane was built with room to grow. It is waiting for the turbines to catch up to it, not the other way around. And that flips something that had been stuck for years. For a long time, engineers could design land turbines taller than about 160 meters on paper. They knew how to make them. They knew the taller machines would catch more wind and make more power. But they could not actually install them because no wheeled crane could reach that high to put the pieces in place. The turbines were trapped on the drawing board, held back not by what we could imagine but by what we could lift. That ceiling is now gone. The limit was never the turbine. It was the crane. And the crane just got out of the way. Now widen the lens to the whole country. Remember the plan. About 455 gigawatts of wind and solar megabases out in the deserts by 2030. To put that in perspective, that single desert build-out would be more clean power than any other nation on Earth has in total. One country, one stretch of desert, outbuilding the entire rest of the world. And beyond that, a national push toward roughly 1,300 gigawatts of total wind power by the end of the decade. Look at just one corner of it. In the far west, the region of Xinjiang had reached around 30 gigawatts of installed wind by the end of 2025. And in that single year, it sent more than 140 billion kilowatt-hours of electricity east to the rest of China. Every one of those tall desert turbines, every single tower, needs a machine like this to raise it. The crane is not a one-time marvel. It is becoming a tool, repeated across a continent, again and again and again. And here is the part that reaches beyond China entirely. This is not a problem only China will face. It is a problem the whole world is walking toward. Everywhere that turbines keep growing, the cranes that lift them will eventually fall behind. Europe, the Americas, anywhere chasing taller, more powerful wind. Sooner or later, every one of them hits the same wall China just hit. And this class of machine, the 4,000-ton giant on wheels, may be exactly what they will need on the other side of it. Not a certainty, but a real possibility. A glimpse of the tool the next era of wind power may be built on. In the end, it is easy to fall for the machine. The 4,000 tons, the 200-meter arm, the records, but the machine is only steel. The real story is the people. It is the drivers crawling for days across the country in a convoy of nearly 30 vehicles just to deliver one crane. It is the assembly crews building a giant out of pieces on shifting desert sand. It is the rope teams down on the ground, leaning their whole weight on guide lines, steadying a 150-ton box swaying high above their heads. And it is the workers waiting out a long desert night, watching the wind, holding their breath for the rare, still moment when the air finally goes quiet and the lift can begin. Picture it now. A forest of white towers already turning across the Gobi, thousands of them spinning slowly against an empty sky. And remember that every single one of them was once just a pile of parts on the back of a truck. Every one of them needed a crane. Every one of them needed those people in that quiet hour to put it up. There's something strange and beautiful in it. A machine built to catch the wind that can only be installed in the rare moment the wind goes still. All that power, all that steel, depending on a few minutes of calm and a few patient human hands. So here is the thought to carry with you. We build these enormous things to harness nature, but to build them at all, we still have to wait for nature to grant us the quiet. What does it say about us? That the largest machines we have ever made still bow, in the end, to a moment of stillness.